In this video, I'm going to reveal how to make beautiful girls beg you for sex using the dark occult power of chaos magic. How to psychologically influence any woman to make her chase you for validation, approval, and sex like a dog begging for a little dog treat. And when you understand how to do this, you can literally go outside anytime and generate attraction in women like that. It's like being in a lucid dream. You can be in a bar, a restaurant, or even on the street, and any girl you see with a nice ass or a nice smile, you can just walk up to her, start chatting, and boom, she's completely into you. She's laughing, smiling, touching you, and making it super obvious that she likes you and would be happy to go home with you and get fucked. For example, my most recent girlfriend, this girl, I met in exactly this way. Girl's a decade younger than me, beautiful face, slim, nice body, basically everything I could want in a girl physically. And how did I get her? Went out to a nightclub on my own, completely sober, followed this chaos magic technique I'm going to show you, saw this chick, walked over to her, started chatting, brought her home, we hooked up, and she became my new girlfriend. So, I left the house at 11 p.m. with no girlfriend. 3 hours later, I have a girlfriend. And many would say a pretty hot one. Also, very smart girl, had a degree in medicine, barely drinks, really sweet, kind, like a really, really nice girl. And you can just go out and get her, boom, like that. So how do I do that? What's the secret? Well, it all comes down to chaos magic. But before I tell you what chaos magic is and how to use it, we need to talk about Andrew Tate, we need to talk about the Matrix, and we need to talk about the country called Tibet. Andrew Tate became very popular for telling men that they need to escape the Matrix. But leaving the Matrix is for bitch-ass niggas. What you'll learn in this video is how to control the Matrix, how to program it to make it give you what you want, how to bend the Matrix to your will, and make it bring you beautiful naked girls on a silver fucking platter. Now, the idea that we live inside a matrix or a simulation is not new. According to Buddhism, we live inside an illusion, an unreal world that they call Maya. The word Maya literally means magic or illusion in the sense of a magic trick. It's said to connote the sense of a magic show, an illusion where things appear to be present but are not what they seem. As one meme I saw recently put it, there's basically 3 stages to understanding this. The first is the retard stage where you believe that magic is real. The second is the midwit stage where you think magic is a trick. The third stage is the state of illuminated understanding in which you realize that reality is a trick. Now, if reality itself is illusory, if what we call reality and think is solid is actually not so solid at all, then those who become magicians can learn to shape this reality in whatever direction they desire. And that is what chaos magic is all about. It begins with understanding that the world as we know it is an illusion. This solid seeming world isn't real. It's a fabrication, a trick, a shared hallucination. And once you realize this, you can control the hallucination. This world is a dream.
We live inside a dream.
But there are 3 kinds of people in this world. There are those who don't know they're dreaming and who therefore have no choice but to accept whatever happens to them in the dream. There are those who know they're dreaming, but who have decided to wake up and leave the dream. But there is also a third group of people, of whom I consider myself one. These are people who have realized they're in a dream, but who have no desire to wake up from the dream. What they want instead is to be able to exercise control over the contours of their dream. In other words, normal reality means living inside a dream. Awakening or becoming enlightened means leaving the dream and waking up. But becoming a magician means staying asleep, staying inside the dream, but turning it into a lucid dream which you can control. Now, there's many things you can do with this knowledge. On this channel, we focus on only one: getting girls, getting This offends some people. They imply that this is an ignoble or petty use of our magical powers. For example, a comment I recently got on my video about how to build an astral body or rainbow body, as one guy writes, if you had a rainbow body, you wouldn't be talking about getting pussy. This dipshit has evidently never heard of Drukpa Kunli, so-called saint of 5,000 women, a wandering Buddhist monk and enlightened Dharma lord whose sexual appetites were notoriously monstrous. And yet he is still revered as a great saint and holy man by the conservative religious people of Bhutan to this day. Look, in case it isn't already crystal clear, this video and this channel is for guys who unapologetically want sex. They want beautiful women. They want sexual variety and choice.
I won't apologize for my sexual proclivities, Ms. Krause.
Yet each of these practices demonstrates a tendency towards violence. Wouldn't you agree?
The genetic fact is that women respond to male domination. And the role of the male is to dominate his mate and to discipline her when she steps out of line. It's biblical. St. Paul, wives, submit to your husbands. That's all I'm here to do. Dominate.
Judge, plaintiff will stipulate that the sexual practices depicted in the show
I'm
are
sorry, the
accurate.
plaintiff is merely trying to interrupt.
Okay, so how do you hack the matrix to make women beg you for sex wherever you go? As I've said, this all comes down to a framework called chaos magic. But what is chaos magic? I'm going to be using this term in a slightly different way to how it's normally described, but in order to understand this topic in a simple way, I'm just going to start off by giving you the main summary of chaos magic as it's given on Wikipedia. So as they write there, chaos magic teaches that the essence of magic is that perceptions are conditioned by beliefs, and that the world as we perceive it can be changed by deliberately changing those beliefs. Chaos magicians consequently treat belief as a tool, often creating their own idiosyncratic magical systems and blending different disciplines. Chaos magic rejects the existence of absolute truth and views all occult systems as arbitrary symbol systems that are only effective because you believe in them. Its central defining tenet is the idea that belief is a tool for achieving effects. Different magical systems like Kabbalah, astrology, etc. are treated as maps or symbolic constructs that can be manipulated to achieve certain ends, but that have no absolute or objective truth value in themselves. Chaos magic's rejection of all fixed models of reality reflects one of its central tenets: nothing is true, everything is permitted. This was a maxim attributed to Hassan-e-Saba, the notorious medieval Islamic warlord, mystic, and founder of the Order of the Assassins, or Hashashim. Furthermore, chaos magicians utilize trance states as a means of attaining an unmediated experience of the inchoate and indeterministic ground of being known as chaos. Within trance, chaos magicians believe that they are able to transform both their perception and the substance of the world by magically reshaping the chaos force in accordance with their own desires. So, basically, chaos magic is the magic of belief. It's about changing your beliefs in order to achieve altered states of consciousness. Within these altered states, you can then change and manipulate reality to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the skill of the practitioner, which again is possible because following the theory of Maya, reality itself is an illusion created by consciousness. Reality is made not of matter, but of beliefs. Chaos magic is postmodern, meaning it rejects the idea that there is a single absolute truth. In other words, as a human being, you're not God. You're not omniscient. You have finite understanding and limited comprehension. And so we can never really be sure what the truth actually is. What we have instead are simply beliefs about what's true. And at the end of the day, every belief is really just an interpretation. But there are always multiple different ways you could choose to interpret any situation or any set of facts. For example, there's this classic image of this woman, right? Is she an old hag or is it a young, attractive girl? Well, it depends on how you look at it, right? And everything in life is like this. It's always a matter of perspective. It's always a matter of interpretation. And there are always an infinite number of different interpretations you could choose. And so the fundamental idea of chaos magic is that beliefs are a tool. Chaos magicians adopt different belief systems and just as quickly discard them like changing a set of clothes, depending on what's useful to achieving their will in that moment, in that situation.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, nice to meet you. Roy Cohn.
This is a nation of men, not laws. Fuck what people think of you.
There is no right and wrong. There is no morality.
There is no truth with a capital T. It's a construct. It's a fiction. It's man-made. None of it matters except winning.
Now, a classic example of this in the context of pickup and getting girls is the idea or the belief that women love sex. You know, if you want to get really good at picking up girls, it's very, very useful to cultivate that specific belief, or you could even call it a delusion, quote unquote. You know, this idea that women love sex, they all just want to get fucked, they all want to get bent over, they're all thinking about sex all the time. Now, is that necessarily always true? Probably not, but it's a useful belief to cultivate if you want to get laid. It will also tend to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe that women don't like sex, then when you approach them, you'll feel weird and icky, like you're doing something wrong that you should feel guilty about. This will cause you to unconsciously give off a nervous, shy, timid, uncomfortable vibe, which turns women off, causing them to reject you and further reinforcing the original belief that women don't like sex. When I approach them and try to get sex, they reject me, they hate it, they hate sex, they hate me, it all sucks, right? But if you believe that women love sex and they're thinking about sex all the time, then when you approach them, you'll feel good about it. You'll have a sense of humor about things. You'll be like, yep, here I am. Here's the dick. Rejoice. The dick is here. This will tend to give you a fun, playful vibe, which will make the girls like you. Some of them actually will have sex with you, which in turn strengthens your belief or delusion that women all want sex, they're all complete nymphos. And this will then make you even more confident and self-amused on your next approach, making women sleep with you even more. And it just becomes this runaway feedback loop of awesomeness, and life just starts getting really, really good. You start thinking, why was I taking everything so seriously before? This rules. This is so easy. But what prevents this from happening for most guys? They can't get out of the shitty, low-rent version of reality they're in because they don't want to give up their pre-existing beliefs. The only way to change your reality is to change your beliefs. If you're not willing to change those beliefs, you will continue to be trapped in the reality loop those beliefs have created for you. Okay, so that's the simple intro to this topic of chaos magic and how it massively overlaps with a lot of classic pickup artist theory. But I now want to take this deeper. We're going to talk about what I call reality fields or reality bubbles. So, one of the basic ideas of chaos magic is that we are all walking around in our own reality bubble. Or they sometimes call this a reality tunnel. I'm not crazy fond of that term because two tunnels can't exactly interact. It's not a great metaphor in that respect, but they call it a reality tunnel. It's an interesting concept. Point being, we all have different beliefs. We all interpret the world in completely different ways. And in a way of looking at it, you could almost say we all inhabit our own completely different reality bubble around us. What is true in your world is not true in my world, and vice versa, even if there may be a few superficial similarities or rare areas of overlap. Now, that being said, your reality bubble can be strong or it can be weak. The more certain you are about your beliefs, your worldview, your values, your convictions, the more that other people will tend to get drawn into your reality field. And when they're inside your reality field, now what you believe is true is also what they believe is true. So in other words, your beliefs are now controlling their reality. And ultimately, two opposing reality fields cannot coexist in the same space for long. The stronger reality field always overcomes the weaker one. The person with the weaker sense of reality always falls into the frame of the person with the stronger sense of reality. And this whole game of getting girls, making girls beg you for sex, it is really all just about making her fall into your reality field, making her fall into your frame, as the pickup artists used to call it. That's all. That's all there is to this. It's about having a strong magnetic reality field, having a set of beliefs in which you are her best option, and then getting her to fall into your reality field so that she believes that as well. That's game. That's the art of seduction. There's nothing else to it than that. You have to have a strong reality bubble, a strong reality field, and you have to get her into your reality field rather than getting sucked into her reality field where you might not be your best option. She's got to believe what you believe, namely that you are Jesus Christ, you walk on water, and getting f***ed by you is the best thing that could ever happen to her in her otherwise bleak and desolate existence. And if you don't believe that, you better start, because that's the only way you're going to get these hot girls. Okay, so I know we've covered a lot here, but just one more final concept I need to briefly touch on before we get into the real meat of how you actually do this is what's called the law of state transference. Now, credit where it's due, this is not my own concept. This was first developed by a group of guys called Real Social Dynamics. These guys cold approached thousands of girls back in the early 2000s. They got pickup down to an exact science. And one of the most valuable things they figured out was an extremely powerful principle, which is really like the number one rule of all seduction and all social dynamics. And this is what they called the law of state transference, or in other words, whatever you feel, she feels. Meaning, when you're interacting with a girl, she will always imitate the emotions you're feeling, and she will feel those same emotions herself. In science, this is called emotional contagion. If you're feeling good, the girl will also feel good around you. This will tend to make her like you because, people like feeling good, duh. But if you feel nervous or bored or uncomfortable or like what you're doing is weird, she'll also feel those exact same emotions from interacting with you, which obviously isn't good. In other words, again, whatever you feel, she feels. Now, when you understand this, it actually allows you to control how she feels. How? By controlling how you feel. And so tying this back into chaos magic, this is another reason why your beliefs are so important in success with women. Because what determines how you feel? Well, to a large extent, it actually comes down to your beliefs. It comes down to how you're choosing to interpret reality and what you're choosing to focus on in that moment. Those things affect your emotional state, and because whatever you feel, she feels, your emotional state is transferred onto the girl. And this is why, contrary to popular belief, girls almost never reject your approach based on how you look. look, they almost only ever reject you because something is off in your vibe. You know, if you feel kind of like ick talking to her, she'll feel ick as well. And that's what makes her reject you. It's almost never about your looks. And so the whole key to getting laid on command, the whole key to sucking girls into your reality field and making them literally beg you for sex, it all comes down to putting yourself in the emotional state you want the girl to be in. In other words, you have to become an expert at making yourself feel good. You have to become an expert at getting in the zone, quote unquote. That's really all it is. If you can do that, you can get laid on command, anywhere, anytime, with almost any girl. You know, within reason, of course. You have to become an expert in making yourself feel good. You have to become an expert at summoning positive emotions from within yourself at will, like summoning a fucking demon. That's the absolute heart of this. If you can do that, you control the matrix as far as sex and girls are concerned. Why? Because as we all know by now, women are emotional creatures. They live and act entirely in the emotion of the present moment. Therefore, if you can control their emotions, you basically can control them. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the word control in this context, but I'm just trying to speak in simple, direct terms here. It's all about controlling your own state, being able to self-generate a positive emotional state from within yourself at will. Because when you can summon those positive emotions, they automatically transfer onto the girl, and that's what makes her love you. That's what makes her addicted to you. And that's what this chaos magic method I'm going to show you is really all about. So, how do you do that? Well, I'm going to show you two techniques today. The first is called self-amusement. The second is called extreme self-love or extreme narcissism. These are the two keys to summoning state on command, to self-generating positive emotions at will, and ultimately this is how you hack the matrix and get it to give you all the sex you could ever want. So strap in and let's rock. First off, we're going to talk about self-amusement. So the idea of self-amusement is simple. You want to make the girl feel good. You want to make the girl laugh. As Marilyn Monroe once said, if you can make a girl laugh, you can make her do anything.
What do you say we have dinner together?
Wonderful. Where?
Oh, someplace where we don't have to dress, like your apartment.
So how do you make the girl laugh? You make her laugh by making yourself laugh. Because again, whatever you feel, she feels. So it's kind of counterintuitive. You know, the way to make a girl laugh is not to say things you think she'll find funny. Instead, it's to say things that you find funny, that make you laugh, and then that state transfers onto her automatically, causing her to laugh, causing her to feel good, which is what makes her like you. So self-amusement is really the key to everything. You have to become a master at making yourself laugh. Now, where this gets kind of interesting is that, you know, every guy has a slightly different sense of humor. You know, what makes me laugh is not going to be exactly the same as what makes you laugh. And so there is no one size fits all answer for how to become self-amused. You're going to have to experiment around with this for yourself. And this is going to take a little bit of time. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. You're going to have to open up a file in your mind and literally open up like a document in your phone and start taking notes and jotting down anything you hear throughout the day that makes you genuinely laugh out loud. Also, whenever you go out and talk to girls, after coming home, write down a list of 3 things you said that night that made you genuinely laugh. Once you have that cheat sheet, you're going to be able to get in the zone very, very fast. But it all comes down to getting in touch with what your unique sense of humor actually is. So I can't do this for you, but that being said, I'm just going to give you a short list here of a few things I like to say to girls to amuse myself, to make myself laugh, to put myself in the zone, because once I'm in the zone, any girl I talk to from that point is going to totally love me, and that's how you actually get laid and get results. So one way I really like to self-amuse right now is with what I call making intentionally bad opening moves. In other words, being kind of a beta male on purpose. You know, saying stuff to the girl that is intentionally low value and kind of cringe because I find that extremely funny. For example, I go up to the girl, I'll make initial contact with her using the hand of God opener. This is where you hold out your hand like this without saying anything while making calm, steady eye contact with her. Then when she takes my hand, I'll ask her something like, "Will you marry me?" Or I might say, "Do you want to be my girlfriend?" Now, is that good game? Strictly speaking, it's actually kind of bad game. You know, technically, you're kind of chasing, you're kind of giving your power away. But that's what makes it funny to me. Or some other examples, you know, I might tell the girl things like, "I love you. Do you like me? Do you want to make out right now?" Or I might tell her, "I think you're my soulmate. I'm really shy. I don't really know how to talk to girls. You know, I don't have a lot of experience. I'm actually here to lose my virginity. I'm very needy. I don't have a lot of confidence. And I find all this very, very entertaining and very amusing, and seeing the kind of confused look on the girl's face, like, this guy seems so cool and confident, but he's saying these super needy things. It's like, what the fuck is going on here? And because I'm amused by it, ultimately the girl is going to be amused by it too. And even if she's not, it still puts me in a good mood, which will then make me do even better on the next approach. Now, interestingly, as an aside here, one of the things I found when playing around with this is that you can say the absolute worst, most cringe, embarrassing things to a girl, but if you say them in an extremely confident, dominant vocal tonality, ultimately it will come across as attractive. Like, for example, yes, I'm extremely needy. You know, I don't have a lot of confidence. I'm a beta male with a tiny penis, and I really don't know how to talk to girls. Now, what's funny is that if you say it in that tonality, the girl is going to assume you're being sarcastic and she's going to wind up getting attracted. So part of the self-amusement for me is like, how can I say things that are wrong, that kind of hit the wrong note, but deliver it with so much confidence and swagger behind it that it actually works anyway. I find that really, really funny to play around with. Now, in the same vein, I also like to make up ridiculous plot lines and stories that make me look bad, or that are just kind of surreal and weird. You know, for example, I'll tell girls things like, yeah, so I still live with my mom, and actually, I still sleep in the same bed with her still. Is that okay? And the girl's trying to be polite, like, yeah, I guess that's fine. But at the same time, because there's such a mismatch between like how confident I am and what I'm saying, the girl sort of feels like, wait, like, is he being sarcastic here? Is he making fun of me? Like, what's going on? Or they think like, he's clearly lying about these things, but why is he lying about things that don't even make him look good? Like, why isn't he trying to fuck me like everyone else? I just find that really funny. And so I personally got a huge kick out of that, you know, scrambling people's minds, putting them off balance, fucking with their reality, and making bad opening moves is one way to do that. You know, I also like absurdist humor. The more surreal and confusing, the better. I might ask the girl, have you seen me before? And they're like, no. And I go, then how do you know it is me? And I walk off. Now, another form of self-amusement I really love right now is sort of the opposite of acting like a beta, and this is what I describe as extreme narcissism, which we'll expand on a lot more later on. Basically, playing the role and taking on the character of a guy who's unbelievably cocky, arrogant, full of himself, just a complete asshole, a complete dickhead, almost similar to kind of like a WWE heel or one of the villains in pro wrestling. Or it's sort of like that movie Man on the Moon, where Andy Kaufman is bragging about how he'll wrestle any woman.
Women are superior to men in many ways. That's right. When it comes to cooking and cleaning and washing the potatoes, scrubbing the carrots, but when it comes to wrestling, shut up! Be quiet when the man is talking! The winner and still undisputed intergender wrestling champion, I am the winner! I've got the brains!
So it's this sort of vibe of constantly making fun of the girl, telling her I'm better than her. You know, I might tell her things like, I'm out of your league. You should be begging for my number like a dog begging for a dog treat. You know, I like to say I have low standards, or like, you know, you seem like an easy target, low hanging fruit. Or I might tell the girl randomly, you know, why do you love me so much? Or I'll just say straight up, you love me. Don't even try to hide it. So needy, so pathetic. It's okay though. I'll give you a chance. I have low standards. Now again, I need to clarify, will saying these things make the girl like you? Well, not necessarily. I mean, often it actually will make her laugh, but just as likely it might piss her off as well. But I don't care about that. At least not during the first few approaches of the night, because again, all I care about is making myself laugh, getting myself in the zone, amusing myself.
I'm an agent of chaos.
So even if the girls react badly, that just makes me laugh even more. I find that even more funny because now she's taking this ridiculous character I'm playing seriously. Another thing I like in the same vein is what I call the rejoice opener. Now this is an opener, it's also kind of a frame or a mindset. Basically, I'll go up to the girl or a group of girls, I'll hold out my arms for my body, palms facing up, and I just say, rejoice. And the whole frame is like, rejoice, I'm here now. Congratulations, you get to meet me. Aren't you lucky? And you know, I'm saying that for self-amusement. I don't really take it seriously, but at the same time, deep down, I also kind of do believe it. And funny enough, girls respond really, really well to this opener. You know, I mean, it obviously takes some serious balls to do an approach like this, but if you can do it congruently, they often just immediately start hugging you and being like, yay. like completely buying into it for no real reason at all. So those are just a few examples of ways I like to amuse myself when talking to girls. That's what puts me in the zone, puts that twinkle in my eye, gets it to where I'm actually having fun talking to girls. And when I'm in that state of enjoyment, laughter, feeling good, the girl's going to feel good around me. And so getting them to do whatever you want at that point is very, very easy. You really just have to escalate and lead. That's kind of all there is to it. And ultimately, you've got to train yourself to find everything amusing. You know, find the rejections amusing. Find the awkward moments amusing. There's so much bullshit and weirdness and chaos you're going to have to go through when you're out approaching girls that really the only way to survive it at all is to start finding literally everything amusing. Take a God's eye perspective on yourself. You know, if you get humiliated or embarrassed, imagine you were someone else watching that happen to another person and find it funny. Laugh at it. Laugh at you. When you can do that, you'll start to become emotionally bulletproof. And it will get to a point where nothing anyone does can remotely affect you. Like no matter what people say, you're just laughing. So self-amusement is the first technique of using chaos magic to make girls love you. That's what gives you that magnetic vibe and aura where the girl sees you're completely self-sufficient. You don't need her at all. You're having fun and laughing through self-generating your own positive emotions through your own humor and jokes. And it's sort of like you're inside a closed circle and she's outside the circle and you're laughing at these inside jokes that she doesn't quite understand, and she wants to get inside the circle and be one of the cool kids so she can understand the inside jokes. And that's why when you get good at self-amusement, this is actually one of the main triggers that causes girls to chase you. Okay, the next technique or mindset of making girls beg you for sex using chaos magic is something I already hinted at a second ago. It's what I call the mindset or belief system of extreme narcissism, extreme self-love. And if you want hot girls to chase you for sex, you're going to need to make this your new mental operating system. So, self-love, extreme narcissism, this basically means being in love with yourself. Being into yourself, being more in love with you than you are with the girl, being more interested in you than you are in the girls, cultivating that delusionally self-confident, arrogant, dickhead type persona that just pulls girls in like moths to a fucking flame. Now, the reason this is so important actually goes a lot deeper than you might think. You know, almost everyone these days realizes like, yeah, girls like assholes. They like that kind of cocky, arrogant vibe from a guy. But the reason being a narcissist specifically is so important though has to do with the nature of desire. And it all comes back to that good old law of state transference, i.e. whatever you feel, she feels. Narcissism in the classical definition actually refers to desiring yourself. It means you love you more than you love the girl or anyone else outside of you. Now, by the law of state transference, this is how you actually make a girl love you. Because if you love you, then she's going to imitate that emotion. It's going to kind of infect her. And so she's going to love you as well. Hence why it's very common for beautiful women to fall madly in love with actual narcissists. By contrast, what do most normal and so-called healthy guys do? Well, they don't actually love themselves. They love the girl. They desire the girl. They're interested in the girl. They put the girl on a pedestal. But because whatever you feel, she feels, if you desire her, then she will also desire her. When you love her, when you make it all about her, by the law of state transference, that makes her love herself. And so it actually makes her narcissistic. What you want to do instead is reverse this process. You want to become like the Ouroboros, the snake sucking its own dick. You want to get into yourself. Become so in love with yourself that the girl can't help but fall in love with you as well. Now, this is very, very counterintuitive, but again, if you understand the law of state transference, then it actually makes perfect sense. Remember, you need to put yourself in the state you want the girl to be in. You want her to love you, which means you have to love you, and that means being an extreme narcissist. Understand? So, in other words, the best way to make a girl obsessed with you is to become obsessed with yourself. This infects the girl, it's contagious, and she will become obsessed with you as well. This is also what gives you that extremely strong reality field that sucks girls in like a black hole. It makes her believe whatever you believe, and it makes it to where even if you're not her type, because you believe you're insanely attractive, she will also believe you must be attractive. And so basically, your narcissism and self-love is so strong that it literally starts to warp the reality around you. Textbook chaos magic. And you'll know you're doing this right when you go out to bars or clubs or whatever, and by about 1 a.m. or so, you've literally got girls approaching you, trying to dance with you, coming up to you and literally saying things like, you're beautiful, you're so hot, you're sexy, I love you. Okay, so how do you actually do this in practice? How do you develop that extreme self-love? Well, the first step is actually somewhat counterintuitive, and it's basically that if you're into self-help, if you're into self-improvement, if you're into learning about pickup and what girls like, stop. Because what you need to do instead at this point is actually to reverse the arrow of focus here away from the girls and onto yourself. Meaning, instead of trying to figure out what do girls like or what do they want or what do they respond to, instead start putting the majority of your focus on what do you like? What are you into? What do you find cool? What kind of jokes and humor make you laugh? Basically, you need to become an expert on yourself. So stop trying to become an expert on girls and instead become an expert on the subject of you. So a few questions that will help you get started on how to think about this are, what are your hobbies? What do you love doing in your free time? What are some of your guilty pleasures? What are your favorite movies and TV shows? What are your favorite characters from those movies or shows? And try to figure out the patterns, like, what is it specifically about that character that appeals to you? And ultimately, what you're trying to figure out is what is unique about you. What are some things that are weird and different about you? And these things, funny enough, when you develop them, are very often going to be the most powerful things that make you magnetic to girls. Now, I realize it might not seem that way at first. Hearing this, your first reaction might be, well, there really isn't anything unique about me. I'm just kind of the same as everyone else. Or, if your hobbies are like watching anime and playing video games or something, you might be thinking like, well, how could I possibly turn that into an attractive character trait? Like, it doesn't really make sense. But there's always a way. When you understand chaos magic, truth is in the eye of the beholder. You can make anything cool. I don't care how weird it is. It's just about becoming a master of learning how to frame it. And again, this gets back to that underlying chaos magic framework, which is there is no absolute truth. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. And so you can make anything seem cool because at the end of the day, there is no final law or arbiter of what is cool or what's not cool. There's no high council or Supreme Court that decides on that. It all just comes down to local reality on the ground. It all comes down to how strong is your personal reality field? How strong is your frame? When you have a strong reality field, you can warp reality to make good seem bad, bad seem good, to make uncool seem cool, and cool seem uncool. It's all subjective.
Rule 1. The world is a mess. You have to fight back. Attack, attack, attack. Rule 2. What is truth, Tony? What is truth? You know what's truth? What you say is truth. What I say is truth. What he says is truth. What is the truth in life? Deny everything, admit nothing. You know what's true? What I say is true. Third of all, and most important, no matter how fucked you are, you never, ever, ever admit defeat. You always claim victory.
So let's just take the example of watching anime. I'm not really a big fan of anime myself, but I know a lot of guys like it. And on the face of it, that seems like something you wouldn't really want to talk to hot girls in a club about, right? Wrong. If I was super into anime, if I watched it every day, and if I genuinely did love talking about it, I would actually lead with that. I would start talking to girls about that immediately. For example, I might say, you know what I fucking love? Anime. I especially love Evangelion. It's my favorite fucking show of all time. I love Asuka, I love Rei, I love Masato. I want to drink beer with Masato and the shit out of her. I'm going to kidnap you and make you watch anime with me all night. Now, if you talked about it like that, with passion, with dominance, with conviction behind it, and also with a certain level of self-amusement behind what you're saying, then the girl is going to love it. She's going to be like, holy shit, this guy's actually cool. He's passionate, he's interesting. And also, another big secret here is 90% of the time, the girls are not really listening all that closely to the actual words you're saying anyway. What they are paying attention to, what they're paying close attention to, is your body language, your vocal tonality, in other words, the vibe. It's not necessarily what you say, but the way you say it that creates attraction. And so you really could talk about any even somewhat embarrassing or nerdy hobby of yours, but if you talk about it in a self-amused way, the girl is going to become attracted because again, whatever you feel, she feels. If you genuinely enjoy a certain conversation topic, a certain joke or plot line, she'll enjoy it too, even if logically she herself doesn't really get it yet. And this is how you draw girls in. This is how you make them addicted to being in your world. So start figuring out what makes you unique, what makes you different. And like they say in marketing, it's more important to be different than it is to be better. You have to stand out in some way. So embrace your weirdness, double down on it, develop it, and then ultimately make it cool. You set the standard. You create your own reality. The girls will adapt onto your reality. Now, again, there is no one size fits all answer to how you do this because by definition, it has to be unique to you. It has to be personal to you. The more personal you make it, the better. But just to explain this, a few things that are unique to me, just as an example, when I was a teenager, I was very rebellious. I listened to a lot of rock music, Marilyn Monroe, stuff like that. I dressed in all black. I was always kind of a loner, an outcast, and I was always somewhat attracted to the dark side of life, so to speak. I always rooted for the villains in TV shows and movies since I was a small child. And I was always interested in like dark, sinister things like serial killers, horror movies, things like that. I actually read Charles Manson's autobiography when I was like 12, taught me many of my keys to success. And then lastly, I was extremely rebellious against any kind of authority. I hated school, I was always getting into trouble, and I took a certain pride in defying authority. Now, on the face of it, as you might imagine, none of these things help me to get girls or be attractive to women. As I've described it, that doesn't really sound like a guy who's going to be getting a lot of pussy in high school, right? And I didn't. And so as I got older, I started changing these things about myself in order to try to fit in, and ultimately because I wanted girls. And at that time, the girls in my environment were into guys who dressed kind of preppy, they played rugby, they wore Abercrombie and Fitch, they listened to like chart music or rap music. And so I began changing myself to try to fit into that standard. And this did actually work to an extent. I did wind up making out with some girls. I actually got a pretty hot girlfriend towards the end of high school when I was about 18. But what I realized later on was that in order to get to the next level and to become really attractive to girls, I actually needed to bring back some of those weird or unique parts of my personality that I previously suppressed or hidden to try to fit in more. But this time to do it from a position of strength and to actually make them cool. And this was a huge epiphany for me. This was what let me get to an entirely new level of game in terms of being able to get hotter girls, get in the zone more easily without needing alcohol, be way more charismatic and magnetic to women naturally, have way more force behind my personality. It all comes down to embracing your unique weirdness and doubling down on it. So, for example, I've actually gone back to wearing a lot of all black much of the time. I'm not dressing like I did when I was 13. I'm obviously not going to the club in a band t-shirt or something, but I am wearing, an expensive black leather jacket, black designer boots, a black shirt, or I might wear like a black suit. So what I'm wearing is appropriate to the situation, like it's stylish and classy, but it still has that undertone of darkness and non-conformity and a kind of edginess to it that expresses my unique personality and what I'm actually into. And the difference is that when I was young, I was weak, timid, shy, whereas now, I've been lifting weights for 10 years, I have a good physique, I'm pretty jacked, and I'm no longer shy at all. So now, even though I'm still expressing my true nature, which is actually very similar to how I was as a kid, unlike when I was a kid, now it's actually coming from a place of strength rather than weakness. So when I say double down on your unique weirdness, I don't mean stay a weak little I mean keep what's unique to you and feature it, but build yourself up so that you're now doing it from a position of strength. Or another example of how I personally did this is with that attraction to the dark side that I always had when I was a kid. Now again, on the surface, that doesn't seem like something that would be all that helpful for getting girls, but actually that's become a huge part of my sense of humor and self-amusement now. And so in a way, it's actually one of the main ways that I'm able to be so compelling to women from cold approach at this point. I've sometimes called this evil maxing. Talk about this a lot in my free email newsletter. You can sign up for that by clicking the link in my pinned comment down below. And by evil maxing, I don't mean actually being evil or doing anything that harms other people. Obviously, don't do that. I use the term more to mean that in the context of talking to women for self-amusement purposes, I generally like to cultivate a vibe of being playfully evil. Playfully cruel. For example, when a girl asks me what I do or where I'm from, I like to make up evil plot lines, evil backstories. Like I've told girls things like, I'm from Mexico, I work for the Sinaloa cartel, I'm a drug trafficker, I'm a corrupt police detective, I'm a Satanist, I'm a millionaire, I'm a serial killer. I generally just try to think in terms of like, what is the most evil job I could have? And then I make up some lie based on that. For example, I was recently talking to this really hot blonde girl, like a legit perfect 10, and I told her that I'm an arms dealer. I sell missiles. I mainly operate in the Middle East and North Africa. I made it quite believable. And basically the entire interaction was just me making up this story and her getting really upset about it and me then doubling down even more. Like, hey, look, someone's got to sell these weapons. It's not me, it's going to be someone else, right? And she was like, but you're killing innocent people. And I was like, I know. Isn't it awesome? Boom. Strong emotions. Attraction. And ultimately, after a while, I did let the girl know I was just fucking around. And funny enough, she gave me her number and I was really expecting her to flake because, we really didn't talk about all that much or have any real connection. This was kind of the only thing that we even talked about in the conversation. But she actually didn't. She actually texted me back and we met up for a date, got drunk, fooled around. It went very well. Now, why did that work? Is it because I told the girl I sell missiles? Is that the new pickup line? No. It worked because I was into it. Making up that particular lie, that particular backstory amused me. It made me laugh. It made me feel good. It put that little twinkle in my eye. And because I felt good, by the law of state transference, the girl also felt good, even if logically she was kind of against what I was saying most of the time. And so what I've done there is I've taken something that is very unique to me, that like for whatever reason, I always rooted for the villains growing up and kind of still do now, to be honest. And I now express that through the filter of pickup and interacting with women. And this is really the essence of what self-actualization is all about. You take these things that are personal to you, and instead of suppressing them to try to fit in, you do the opposite. You develop them further. You turn them into strengths. And then they actually become the main pillars of what makes you cool and interesting and magnetic to women. It's like Jesus said, the stone that the builders rejected becomes the cornerstone. And again, this is all due to that law of state transference of whatever you feel, she feels. Or again, another personal example for me is I was always pretty rebellious in school, right? I got in trouble a lot. And I always enjoyed defying authority, being different, being controversial. And basically, I always had a strong attraction to that archetype of the rebel. And so now when I go out and do pickup, that's actually a big part of my underlying mindset, because if you think about it, right, like what actually stops you from approaching, it's mainly because you're worried about what people will think. Well, what's the opposite of that? It's being a rebel, being an outlaw, having that mindset of extreme individuality, extreme non-conformism. That's always appealed to me. And so what I figured out is that I can actually use that in my game to make it much, much stronger, to make me take the right actions and overcome that social pressure and that resistance. And so when you put all this together, you know, in my case, the all black clothes, the leather jacket, the kind of devilish glint in my eye that comes from self-amusement, and then the fact that by approaching, by taking action, by actually embodying those values I respect the most, like individualism, non-conformism, standing out, being controversial, being extreme, being an outlaw. Well, when you put all that together, and when I'm now standing in the club and I see that hot girl and I walk over to her, extremely purposeful, totally careless, and look her dead in the eye like, hey, who the f*** are you? Oh yeah? Interesting. Hi, I'm Michael. Nice to meet you. It all just works because what I'm doing is fully congruent with everything else. And I'm expressing myself in a way that's coming from the deep, deep core of my being. And so I don't need the girl's reaction to feel good about what I'm doing, because the fact that I'm approaching, the fact that I'm living up to my own values, the fact that I'm going against the grain of social conformity, I'm breaking rules, I'm defying social conventions, that's something that I already find innately cool in and of itself, regardless of whether the girl likes me or not. And so by doing that, by being that guy, it all feeds into that self-love, that extreme narcissism, and it starts to put me in the zone. It's also what makes the girls like me by the law of state transference, because if I like me, then obviously they're going to like me. But how do I like me? It's by doing stuff that I think is cool. Like the way I look at this, right, is if I saw a guy dressed the way I'm dressed, doing what I'm doing, you know, approaching a girl with that extreme ballsiness, you know, he's maybe even approaching her in front of her boyfriend or something, like an extreme wild card outlaw type of move like that. If I saw that, I would literally be like, that's the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. Like I would immediately be like, holy shit, I want to be able to do that. I want to be like that. In other words, my actions are completely aligned with my own objective values, which is almost never the case for most people. I'm actually living and acting out my own values, which is a very rare thing. And when you do that, you become fucking bulletproof. Because if I'm doing things that fit that ideal of the type of guy I want to become, and with every action I take, I'm transforming more and more into that ideal future self or that archetype, then I'm automatically going to feel good regardless of the girl's reaction. Because I'm living up to my values and my standards. It's about me, my values, my standards, my aesthetics, my self-amusement, what I think is cool. And the girls get drawn into that like a fucking tractor beam. And my reality field is now so strong that, you know, once I get in the zone, after I've done those initial 4 or 5 warm-up approaches, when I'm walking through the club, you can literally feel the entire room react to me. Like it's literally like I have a gravitational field. People are turning their heads to stare at me like, who the is that guy? And that's what happens to you when you get this down and when you get all these different levels of yourself sorted out and max out your unique personality. You're going to become like a kind of god. And I'm using that word not to be provocative, but really in a quite meaningful sense, because when you fully figure out what your unique weirdness is, what gets you off, what turns you on, what you really value, and then you base everything around that, you will basically come to align yourself with certain principles, certain forces of nature that are immortal and eternal. And when you do that, nothing can stop you, because now it's like you are the embodiment, you are the incarnation of that force of nature which you have chosen to become aligned with. Now, hearing this, you might feel like, okay, well, I guess that means if I want to get girls, I gotta be a rebel like Mike. I gotta wear a black leather jacket, right? And it's like, no. You're missing the entire point if that's the lesson you're taking away from this. See, the whole reason this kind of aesthetic and this vibe works for me is because it expresses my personality, my values, my sense of humor, my weird quirks and kinks and so on. But what's going to work for you might be completely different, and in fact probably will be. And you've got to figure this out for yourself. Now, obviously, you can adopt some of these same mindsets or philosophies I've talked about here if they resonate with you. But the point is, the more personal you make this, the better. So don't just copy my values or my style or my jokes or my sense of humor. Find out the jokes and plot lines and sense of humor that makes you laugh. Find out the conversational topics that you love talking about. Figure out the aesthetics, the style, the way you want to dress and express yourself. Figure out what genuinely and authentically turns you on, and then develop it, reinforce it, and ultimately make it cool. A good way to think about this that can be helpful is, anytime you ever see a guy that you think is cool and who you admire, take note of that. This could be a real guy, it could be someone from a TV show or a movie, but anytime you see a guy and you have that feeling like, damn, that guy's fucking cool, jot it down somewhere. And then when you have a few of these, try to figure out the patterns. Like, what is it about all these guys that you find cool? Is it the way they're dressed? Is it their attitude? Is it something they did, something they said? For me personally, a big pattern I noticed when I started analyzing this was that almost every guy I've ever thought was cool or looked up to in some way, they almost always fit into the archetype of the rebel or the outlaw. It's that guy who breaks the rules in some way, who goes against the grain of what society says you should do. That guy who embodies extreme individualism, who does whatever the he wants and he's completely unapologetic about it. The classic example of this from mythology is the devil. Specifically, it's Lucifer in Milton's poem Paradise Lost, where he's presented as kind of the original rebel, quote unquote. Now, by the same token, though, interestingly enough, if you think about Jesus in the Gospels, he also conforms to this archetype of the rebel or the outlaw. It's that guy who defies authority, does exactly what he wants to do, and doesn't give a what anyone else thinks of him. So it's kind of interesting how both Jesus and Satan conform to that same archetype of defiance. And I would argue that's actually the main thing that makes both of those figures so appealing to people. If you take away the outlaw nature of those characters, I would argue that neither of those figures would be all that interesting. If Jesus just represented love and being nice to people, that's fucking boring if we're being honest. Likewise with the devil or Lucifer, if you actually read any of the passages about the devil in the Bible, they're mostly pretty boring. He's not fleshed out there as a character at all. But the reason people are so obsessed with and polarized by this character of the devil is not because of anything that's in the Bible itself. It's really all down to the way Lucifer was much later portrayed in the poem Paradise Lost by John Milton, where he's depicted as being this fallen angel who rebelled against God. And that's interesting. That's not even in the Bible really, but it's in that poem, and that's what people think of when they think of the devil, and that's why they're so kind of fascinated by that character, both in the positive and the negative. And you could apply this further really to any characters who guys find cool from TV shows or movies. Like, think of Tyler Durden in Fight Club or the Joker in The Dark Knight. Again, the fundamental appeal of these characters is that they embody the archetype of the outlaw in different and interesting ways. It's someone who rejects society's standards, who's completely free, who's an extreme individualist, and is only concerned with doing their will and living up to their values. They're not remotely concerned with fitting in with the values of others. And so that right there, at least for me personally, that really is the formula for what being cool actually is. It's embodying that outlaw archetype. It's living by the value system of extreme individualism. Now, this might not be the same for you though. I do think this rings true for many guys. How many guys watched Fight Club and didn't root for Tyler Durden? I have to imagine most guys did. Yet that being said, I can still conceive of a guy who might have a different value system to this, like maybe for a guy who's super into sports or something. I could imagine that for him, maybe the ultimate male hero isn't an outlaw, but it's a guy who's a good team player or something. For me personally, I find that super fucking gay, but I can imagine the possibility of a guy having that value system and for that to make sense. And so my point is, you need to figure out what is cool to you. You need to decode and analyze and figure out, like, when you see a guy you really admire, what is it about him that you like? What is it about him that makes him cool? And once you figure that out, become that guy or become your version of that guy. Actually live by those values. Take actions in the real world that embody those values. That's really what it all comes down to. That's how you develop that extreme narcissism, that extreme self-love and self-esteem, where you literally love yourself. And because you love yourself, you have that extremely strong reality field that pulls the girls in. And with the law of state transference, it makes her love you as well. Okay, so in this video, I showed you how to make girls want to have sex with you using chaos magic, how to create your own reality and have girls adapt onto it. Now, I've shown you how this works in the context of cold approach, but what I want to teach you next is how to do this over text message, how to do it over online dating. how to use these same principles of chaos magic to make girls chase you for sex, but this time how to do it on dating apps like Tinder or Hinge, or possibly even Instagram, private DMs, or even how to bang that girl who's ghosting you as soon as tonight. You know, on this channel, I almost always only talk about cold approach, but that being said, dating apps make it so easy to get laid, it's almost embarrassing. And if you want to get more experience with girls, it's very important to rack up some of those easy wins to build your confidence. And so what I want to show you is how to create an online dating profile that gets you laid with hot girls on autopilot. And this is all explained in my premium program, the Girlfriend Button. It's the first and only program that shows you how to get a perfect 10 girlfriend as easy as pushing a button. Click the link in the description below to learn more about the Girlfriend Button and find out if you qualify to get it now. Now, when you click that link in the video on the next page, I'm going to reveal 12 magic words that program girls to fall in love with you at the touch of a button. It works even if she's smoking hot and you're old, broke, ugly, or anything else. And this is how you get a 10. This is how you get a harem of girls. This is how you get an infinite stream of girls coming over to your house and getting naked for you, and do it all without leaving your house, simply over text message. It's all down to this simple 12-word text that does all the hard work for you. Click the link in the description and watch the video to learn it now.